He was a powerful millionaire, but a poor girl selling water touched his heart. Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Let's dive into the story together. New York City. Midday, summer. The city that never sleeps was practically boiling. Heat shimmered off the asphalt, and car horns echoed like background noise to a restless rhythm. Under the blazing sun, through a crowd packed with hurried footsteps and sweaty brows, a sleek black car turned slowly into a narrow side street near Union Square. Behind the wheel sat Dylan Mitchell, one of Wall Street's most powerful and notoriously private CEOs. His white shirt was perfectly pressed, not a wrinkle in sight. A dark blue tie sat neatly beneath his collar. Every movement he made carried a quiet authority, the kind of man the world either feared or admired. He had no reason to stop. And yet, a voice cut through the noise. "Ice-cold water! $2 a bottle! Cooler than your AC, I swear!" A young woman's voice, sharp, clear, no hesitation, no trace of embarrassment. It didn't get drowned in the noise. It sliced right through it. Dylan glanced sideways and saw her. She stood beside a battered styrofoam cooler, bottles of cheap water arranged in no particular order. Her t-shirt was faded and wrinkled, jeans worn at the knees, sneakers bleached from time. But it wasn't her clothes that stopped him. It was her presence. She didn't flinch under anyone's gaze. Her hair was pulled up in a high ponytail, revealing a sun-kissed face, sharp eyes, and a kind of reckless energy that wasn't messy, but magnetic. She wasn't selling water. She was owning her corner. Dylan blinked, flipped on his turn signal, and pulled over. Whether it was curiosity or something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years, he didn't know. But he knew one thing. This girl was real. Just then, a man stopped at her stand. Didn't look at her. Just grabbed a bottle, cracked the cap, and started chugging. When she held out her hand for payment, he scoffed. $2? Are you kidding? This stuff's $1 at the store. She didn't flinch. She stepped forward, eyes like flint. You just drank it. If you don't want to pay, spit it out. I'll refund you drop by drop. The crowd froze, then burst into laughter. The man flushed red, crumpled a bill in his fist, and tossed it into the cooler before storming off, trailing a wave of chuckles and sarcastic whistles behind him. The girl didn't smirk, didn't even react. She calmly bent down and reorganized her bottles like nothing happened. Inside his car, Dylan narrowed his eyes. He'd seen thousands of deals, hundreds of power plays, but never anything like this. No title, no money. And yet she had total control of the situation. He opened the door and stepped out. His leather shoes clicked sharply against the scorching sidewalk. The girl looked up, and their eyes locked. You want water? She asked, casual, but far from cold. Dylan Mitchell, the $1 million CEO, felt something he almost never felt. He hesitated. No, he said. I want all of it. Evening descended on New York like a sheer curtain, brushing the sidewalks with a breeze carrying the scent of car exhaust and steam rising from sun-scorched pavement. The crowd had started to thin. Office workers hurried toward the subway, eager to escape the thick humidity hanging over the city. On a forgotten street corner, where no one really paid attention, Sophia stood behind her worn styrofoam cooler. The lid sat ajar, revealing a few bottles still clinging to their condensation. She wiped the sweat from her brow with the hem of her shirt. Her hands were sun-darkened, fingernails chipped, and her bright, defiant eyes framed by lashes that didn't quite soften her gaze. Today was like every other. Long, tiring, and offering no guarantees but the need to survive. Then she heard footsteps, measured, deliberate, striking the sidewalk with a quiet confidence. She looked up. The man from this morning, the one who'd dropped $100 bill and bought her entire cooler without flinching, was walking toward her. His suit was still immaculate, his posture still composed. But this time, he didn't walk like a curious stranger. He walked like a man who had made up his mind. "How many bottles do you have left?" he asked, voice low and steady, not unfriendly, but far from warm. Sophia sized him up, then glanced down at the cooler. "Maybe 12 bottles. No more." "What are you trying to do?" she asked plainly, her tone cool. "Buy them all." She raised an eyebrow, tilting her head slightly. Her expression remained unchanged, but her eyes narrowed. Defensive. Guarded. No one does anything without a reason, especially not men in suits who drive sleek cars and don't know the first thing about street work. "Trying to impress me?" she said, her voice edged. "Because if you are, you're wasting your time." Dylan didn't blink. He pulled out his wallet and set a crisp $100 bill on the wet plastic table between them. "This isn't about impressing you," he said. "It's about making sure you know your time and effort are worth more than what people usually give you credit for." She didn't move. The wind picked up slightly, brushing a few strands of hair behind her ear. Her eyes locked onto his. Cool, calculating, but not completely without feeling. She hated this sensation. Being examined, measured, like someone was trying to figure her out. "You didn't have to do this," she said sharply. "I'm not selling gratitude, and I'm not asking for charity." "I know," Dylan replied. And without another word, he bent down and began lifting the bottles from the cooler, placing them carefully into the paper bag he had brought. She crossed her arms, watching him in silence. Something felt off. Men like him, powerful, polished, used to chilled boardrooms and catered lunches, don't usually crouch down to pack lukewarm water off a street corner. But he didn't complain, didn't pretend to be doing something noble. He just worked. Quietly. Neatly. "You do this often?" she asked, sarcasm tugging at her voice. "No," Dylan said, dropping the last bottle into the bag. "But today felt like a good day to start." When he stood and turned to face her again, the last rays of the sun caught the edge of his face. His features were sharp, restrained, his gaze deep, unreadable. There was no pity in his eyes, no desire either, just something deeply human, like he himself didn't quite understand what was pulling him in. "I'll be back," he said softly. "Don't," Sophia replied immediately, almost like a reflex. Dylan paused. One beat of silence. "You reminded me of something I haven't felt in a long time," he said. "Life. Truth. Defiance." She didn't respond, just watched him walk away, the bottles clinking faintly in the bag at his side. When he disappeared around the corner, Sophia finally looked down at the $100 bill on the table. It was damp with condensation, but felt heavier than any bill she'd ever held. She shoved it into her pocket and tilted her face up to the sky. The sunlight was fading, giving way to the flickering lights of a restless city. Another day was ending. But what lingered wasn't the money. It was the feeling of someone she barely knew reaching in and shaking the walls she'd spent years building. She told herself, tomorrow will be the same. But deep down, something in her chest had already shifted, just a little offbeat. That morning, the sky over New York wore a soft gray hue. No sunlight, no breeze, just a strange stillness, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Sophia walked through the gates of her university, shoulders tight under the weight of numbers. Numbers on a tuition bill she couldn't yet pay. She didn't come for miracles. She came to beg for time. Just one more month. Or two, however long they'd allow before she lost her spot. She had a speech prepared, but she wouldn't need it. The woman at the front desk glanced at her screen, then looked up with a gentle smile. "There's no balance on your account. Someone already covered your tuition this semester." Sophia froze. She didn't smile, didn't speak. Her eyes blinked once, not from relief, but from trying to make sure she hadn't misunderstood. "Do you know who paid it?" she asked calmly. The woman shook her head. "It was done anonymously, but it's all cleared. You can check your email confirmation." Sophia gave a slight nod and turned away. "No, thank you. No questions. Just quiet footsteps back down the hallway, each one heavier than the last, like walking through water. 15 minutes later, she stood in front of Mitchell Enterprises. The glass tower rose like a monument, sleek, cold, impersonal. It didn't welcome people like her. But today, she didn't care. She didn't have an appointment. She didn't stop at the front desk. She moved through the marble lobby like a current, silent but unstoppable. No one dared to stand in her way. She pushed open the office door without knocking. Dylan Mitchell looked up from his laptop. He stood, not surprised, almost as if he'd been expecting her. They stared at each other for a long second. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word cut like stone. He didn't move, didn't raise his voice, just stood in the stillness. "I don't want anything from you, Sophia. I don't expect anything. I just saw something I could do, so I did it." She clenched the strap of her bag, knuckles turning pale. Her chest rose and fell, but she wouldn't let herself unravel. "I don't need you to play the hero," she said. "You don't know what it feels like to have someone fix your life without asking. That's not kindness. That's control." She didn't yell. She didn't cry. But her words dropped between them like small, sharp stones, quiet and unmovable. Dylan didn't argue. He didn't defend. He knew there were moments when explanations only made it worse. She turned, walking toward the door, and then she paused, just as her fingers touched the metal handle. She didn't look back, but her voice, barely above a whisper, lingered in the space they shared. "Don't make me feel weak, because I don't want to need anyone." The door clicked shut behind her. Not loud, but final. Dylan stood still, one hand resting on the edge of his desk, the other hanging loosely by his side. He stared at the spot where she had just been, as if her presence still left a warmth in the air. Outside, it began to rain. The first drops tapped softly against the tall glass windows, muffled, steady, almost like a distant song. He didn't move. Because sometimes pride has a price. And those who mean well, if they don't understand how to offer their help, can hurt the ones they care for the most. Sophia never asked for miracles. All she ever wanted was a fair chance, enough time to study without falling asleep on her textbooks, enough hours at her job to cover rent, and maybe, on rare nights, 5 hours of uninterrupted sleep. But recently, the world around her had begun to shift in quiet, inexplicable ways. It started with the sink. The faucet in her apartment had been leaking for months, dripping like a ticking clock into the chipped porcelain basin. Her landlord had ignored her calls. She'd stopped hoping it would ever be fixed. Then one morning, she woke to silence. The leak was gone. The faucet replaced. Not a note, not a bill. Next came the restaurant. Her manager, a bitter man who loved shouting more than supervising, was suddenly gone. No warning. A new manager arrived, calm, polite. The schedule changed. Sophia got better shifts, and when she apologized one day for leaving 10 minutes early to make it to class, the man simply smiled and said, "School comes first, don't worry." Then, the tuition notice vanished from her student portal. Her debt, Thousands of dollars she had planned to repay over a decade was marked. Paid in full. She didn't need to ask who. She already knew. Dylan Mitchell wasn't calling, wasn't showing up, wasn't leaving messages. But his fingerprints were all over her life. Soft, unannounced, and quietly infuriating. Sophia wanted to scream. She wanted to say, "Thank you," and "Don't you dare" in the same breath. She wanted to confront him, to demand why he was trying to rewrite her story without permission. But more than anything, she just wanted to understand. And then, one rainy afternoon, she got her chance. It had been pouring for hours. New York glistened like a half-forgotten dream, streets reflecting streaks of brake lights and gray sky. Sophia had stayed late at the diner, washing dishes, her arms aching from endless scrubbing. She stepped out under the awning, hoodie pulled up, backpack slung over one shoulder, when she spotted him. Dylan, standing in the rain with a hot dog in his hand. She blinked. For a second, she thought the exhaustion had finally made her hallucinate. But no, that was really him. Sleeves damp, hair mussed, expression unreadable, like he'd just wandered out of a meeting and into her world. He lifted the hot dog slightly like a peace offering. "You hungry?" Sophia stared at him, then at the hot dog, then back at him. "Do you even know how to eat that without a personal chef watching?" His smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. "Guess I'm about to find out." They ended up sitting under a metal awning next to a bodega, their knees nearly touching. The rain was still falling, gently now, and for once, neither of them was in a hurry. "I heard hot dogs taste better in the rain," Dylan said, taking an awkward bite. He winced at the mustard and ketchup running down his hand. "Okay, I may have made that up." Sophia laughed despite herself. "You're ridiculous." "And you're exhausted," he replied quietly. "You shouldn't have to carry it all alone." She looked down at her lap. "I'm used to it." "I know." He wiped his fingers with a napkin. "That's what I hoped." There was no grand gesture, no speech, no pressure, just two people sharing cheap street food in the middle of a rainstorm. And in that moment, Sophia saw something behind Dylan's wealth and power. Something raw and deeply human. He wasn't trying to fix her life. He was just trying to sit beside her in it. New York doesn't whisper for long. It shouts, echoes, then devours. By Monday morning, the news had spread like fire through dry brush. Wall Street titan seen with street vendor. Romance or PR stunt? Dylan Mitchell's mystery woman. Sources say she sells bottled water. Billionaire and the girl from the sidewalk. It didn't matter that no one knew her name, or that they'd never heard her speak. In the eyes of the media, Sophia was now a symbol, fodder for gossip, a punchline dressed in jeans. At first she tried to ignore it, but when classmates started whispering in hallways and customers at the diner stared too long, the humiliation became inescapable. Then came Naomi Stanford. Naomi didn't call. She showed up, high heels clicking across the diner's tile floor, designer coat flaring behind her like a cape. She stood at the counter as if it were a courtroom, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "You must be Sophia," Naomi said, smiling like she tasted blood. "I had to see the legend for myself." Sophia looked up from refilling the sugar dispenser. "Can I help you?" Naomi leaned forward. "Just wanted to give you some advice. Don't get too comfortable. Dylan, he goes through phases. This one's just a little more, how shall I put it, rustic." Sophia gripped the edge of the counter. "If you came here to insult me, you can leave." "Oh, sweetheart," Naomi's voice dripped condescension. "I came to remind you that not all attention is affection. One day you'll wake up and realize he's gone, and then what will you be? Naomi walked out before Sophia could answer. But the damage had already been done. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. Her chest felt tight, her mind spinning with doubts. Was this a game? A phase? Was she just a curiosity to a man who could buy cities? She needed space. She needed air. But Dylan had already found her. The university fundraiser was modest. Fluorescent lights, stale cookies, folding chairs. Sophia had volunteered to check guests at the door, hoping the quiet task would keep her mind off everything. And then he walked in. Every head turned. Every whisper stopped. Dylan Mitchell, in a simple charcoal suit. No entourage, no fanfare, just him. And he was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. He didn't wait. He didn't ask for privacy. He stood in front of faculty, students, donors, and spoke. I love you, Sophia. Silence. I loved you the second you told that guy on the street to spit the water back if he didn't want to pay. I loved you when you didn't flinch at me, even though the rest of the world does. Sophia felt her breath catch. I don't love you because you're different, he said. I love you because you make me want to be. Her hands trembled. Her heart was pounding like a drum, but instead of rushing into his arms, she stepped back. I need time, she whispered. Dylan didn't move. He didn't argue. He just nodded, I'll wait. And that's exactly what he did. As Sophia turned and walked away, Dylan remained in the room, alone under two bright lights, surrounded by people but staring only at the space she had just left. Because love, when it's real, doesn't chase. It stays and it waits. The heat hit different that day. It wasn't just the kind of summer heat that made people grumble and fan themselves with takeout menus. No, it was the kind of heat that made the pavement hiss, the kind that seemed to come from both above and below, as if New York City itself was being baked from the inside out. Sophia had already been out for over an hour. Her cooler, stuffed with bottles of water she packed at dawn, sat faithfully by her side. Her t-shirt clung to her back, and her palms were sticky from the condensation. She wiped her brow, adjusted the elastic holding up her messy bun, and let out a breath. Same corner, same struggle, same city, until something shifted. She didn't notice it right away. Not until the familiar rhythm of her hustle, call, smile, rejection, repeat, was interrupted by a voice that did not belong to this street. $2 a bottle, cold enough to freeze your bad decisions. She turned slowly, thinking maybe one of the teenagers from around the block was playing a prank. But when she looked up, her heart nearly stopped. Standing there, beside her cooler, in sneakers that clearly hadn't touched a sidewalk in years, was Dylan Mitchell, Wall Street's beloved media-shy CEO. But he didn't look like the man she'd seen in polished headlines and Forbes covers. Today, he was wearing a faded gray t-shirt, jeans, and had a grocery bag in one hand, half full of water bottles. His hair was slightly mussed. His shirt clung to him from sweat. He looked human. Dylan? She blinked, genuinely unsure if the heat had finally driven her mad. He smiled like a kid caught sneaking candy. What? You didn't think I'd learn from the best? Are you completely out of your mind? Entirely, he said. And you know what? It feels kind of great. She stared at him. You're selling water? He nodded, dead serious. I figured if you were afraid of stepping into my world, it's only fair I try to understand yours. This is where you stand every day, right? This corner, this heat, these people, it's your life. So, I wanted to feel it too. Sophia didn't know whether to scream, or cry, or laugh. A man who probably had an assistant for his assistant was now standing there sweating like a dishwasher, holding up a bottle of Poland Spring, like it was the Holy Grail. You have a board meeting in an hour, don't you? She asked, half joking. I canceled it. She blinked. You canceled a board meeting to come sweat with me on the sidewalk? He grinned. You're worth more than a quarterly forecast. There was a beat of silence between them, and in that silence, she noticed something. The people walking by were reacting. Some slowed, their brows raised. A few snapped discreet photos. One older woman pointed at Dylan, whispering, "Isn't that—" And Dylan, he didn't flinch, didn't care. He just kept calling out, "Ice-cold water, $2, guaranteed to make you forget your ex." "Stop yelling," Sophia muttered under her breath, but she was smiling now. Not a full grin, just that reluctant upward twitch of the lips she hadn't felt in weeks. "I'm trying to blend in," Dylan replied. "You're wearing $1,000 shoes, Dylan." He glanced down. "Huh. Didn't think that part through." She sighed, finally stepping closer. Her voice softened. "Why are you really doing this?" He turned to her, serious now. "Because ever since I met you, I've felt different, lighter, more real. And you've made me realize that I've spent years in a world where everything had a price. Except meaning. And this?" He looked around. "This might be the first time I've done something that means something." Sophia didn't answer. Her chest ached in that scary, vulnerable way that meant her walls were cracking. She reached for his hand. Not a grand gesture, just a quiet, human one. He let her. "I've spent my whole life trying not to need anyone," she whispered. "Trying to survive alone so no one could ever take anything from me. But maybe that's not strength. Maybe real strength is choosing to let someone stand beside you." Dylan squeezed her hand gently. "Then let me stand here a while longer." She nodded once. They stayed like that. Two people from different worlds, standing side by side under a sun that didn't care about status or income or ego. Just sweat and truth. A teenage girl passed by, giggling as she filmed them on her phone. "This better be a rom-com," she said to no one in particular. Dylan chuckled. "Maybe it is." And as the day wore on, Sophia found herself doing something she hadn't done in a long, long time. She laughed. By late afternoon, the city had softened. The once harsh sun mellowed into a warm, golden haze that draped itself across the old buildings, the cracked sidewalks, and the weary faces of pedestrians. And in the middle of it all, a black car came to a stop on a quiet side street. One of those streets that New York forgot to polish, where the trees grew a little wilder and the air smelled faintly of summer tar and old stories. Sophia stepped out of the car slowly. She didn't ask why they were here. Her heart had already begun to answer for her. In front of her stood something achingly familiar. A folding table, an old white cooler, and inside, just a few water bottles glistening under the last rays of sun. The same setup she'd once used every day. Only this time, there was a single candle flickering beside the cooler, a small sign written in neat black ink. One bottle, one promise. She took a few steps forward, her sneakers scraping softly against the pavement. Her chest felt tight, like it couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. Then she saw him. Dylan was standing behind the table, not in his tailored suits, not with that guarded CEO expression, but in jeans, sleeves rolled up, a quiet humility softening his posture. There was something so still about him, like he had finally stopped fighting the rush of the world, and just stood there, waiting for her. He didn't speak at first, just opened the lid of the cooler and took out one single bottle. The last one. Condensation trailed down the plastic like tears. He held it out toward her. No speech, no performance. Just him. Just her. Sophia's throat tightened. She tried to smile, but it trembled. "You dragged me back here. For water?" Dylan's voice was low, almost reverent. not just for water. He knelt, slowly, his knee touching the concrete where she'd once stood, and argued over $2. The very spot where her fire had caught his attention in a way nothing else ever had. In one hand, the water bottle. In the other, a small box, simple, navy blue, worn slightly at the edges like it had been carried for weeks. I came back to where I first saw you, where everything in my life shifted, he said. You were just trying to make a living, but what you didn't know was you were waking something up in me. He opened the box. Inside was a gold band. No diamonds, no glare. Elegant, understated, honest. Will you trade me this last bottle? He asked gently. For a lifetime of your yes? There was a silence so complete it felt like even the wind had paused. Sophia didn't move at first. She stared at the ring, then at his eyes, steady, open, unafraid. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't hiding behind money, gestures, or grand words. This time Dylan Mitchell was showing up with nothing but himself. Tears welled in her eyes. She covered her mouth, let out a shaky laugh. "This is insane," she whispered, but her voice was cracked with emotion. Then she knelt too. Not to meet him halfway, but because her knees simply gave out. And there, eye to eye with the man who had once tried to fix her problems with his wallet, she saw the truth. He wasn't trying to fix anything now. He just wanted to walk through it with her. "You know," she said, her voice barely audible, "for the longest time, I thought letting you in would mean losing myself. But now, I think maybe loving you is the bravest thing I'll ever do." She reached for the ring, not with hesitation, but with something like reverence. Her fingers closed around it, and then she took his hand and slid the band onto her own finger. "I will," she said, "and I'm not charging you this time." Dylan laughed softly, more relief than joy, and wrapped her in his arms, pulling her into his chest like a man clinging to the thing that finally made him feel real. Around them, the world continued. Taxis honked in the distance. A delivery guy rolled past on a bike. The city, as always, kept moving. But here, in this forgotten corner of Manhattan, a woman who once sold water to survive, and a man who once thought love was a weakness, had just rewritten their lives. Not with diamonds, not with declarations, but with one bottle of water, and a vow that would last a lifetime. The wedding wasn't in a cathedral. There were no marble floors or fountains of champagne. Instead, it took place in a garden behind a friend's cafe, an old brick courtyard tucked between two brownstones, strung with fairy lights that swayed gently in the breeze. Somewhere, wind chimes rang faintly. Only a dozen people were invited. No press, no designer gowns, just people who mattered. Sophia wore a simple ivory dress with short sleeves and bare feet. Her hair was pulled loosely back, wild strands dancing in the wind. No veil, no makeup masking her freckles. She looked exactly like herself, soft, real, and radiant. Dylan wore a navy shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, no tie, no fanfare, just the quiet confidence of a man who had fought his own instincts and, in doing so, found something truer than ambition. The ceremony was short. No long speeches, no rehearsed vows, just eyes locked, hands held, and silence thick with memory. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Dylan hesitated for a moment, not because of nerves, but reverence, as if kissing her would seal not just a promise, but a lifetime of becoming better because of her. Afterward, there was a tiny cake on a wooden table, decorated with 2 sugar daisies. A string of vintage bulbs lit up the dusk like stars strung just for them. And there, beneath the soft glow, Dylan reached out his hand. "Dance with me," he whispered. Sophia laughed under her breath. "There's no music, We've danced through worse, he smiled. They swayed under the lights, not in rhythm, not perfectly, but together. Her cheek rested on his chest, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she had to fight gravity. Later, while the others chatted over pie and homemade lemonade, Dylan and Sophia sat on the back steps, their hands intertwined like they were always meant to find each other in the dark. Sophia turned toward him, her voice no louder than a breath. "Thank you," she said, "for not trying to buy me, for just loving me." Dylan looked at her, his eyes soft. "I didn't buy you," he said. "I gave up the world I thought I needed, just to be worthy of your yes." No one clapped, no fireworks burst. But somehow it felt like the whole city went quiet for just a moment, as if giving them space to settle into the peace they had both spent years running from. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he kissed her temple. There, in that quiet corner of the world, no luxury, no spotlight, they built something far rarer than wealth. They built a home in each other. And when the night grew cold, they didn't leave in a limo or a carriage. They walked, just the two of them, down the same street where they'd once been strangers, hand in hand, heart to heart, no longer searching, no longer proving, just together. Forever began without a single word. Not every wealthy man wants to control. Some are willing to give up power, reputation, even comfort, just to share a hot dog with you under the rain. Because sometimes, love isn't about grand gestures. Again and again, until you feel safe to stay. What did you feel while watching Sophia and Dylan's journey? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Rate the story from 1 to 10, and let us know what moment touched your heart the most. And if you believe in the kind of love that's real, patient, and brave enough to wait, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to follow more beautiful stories just like this one, because here, we don't tell fairy tales. We tell truths with a little magic.